What's up, SE Nation? I got a message from a gentleman by the name of Paul Newsom. He works at Oracle. He's the SE facilitator. He's been there for a few years. His job is basically to help train SEs get better at their job, which not many companies do. I'm glad Oracle has that, and I'm glad Paul works for them. Check him out on LinkedIn. I'll put a link to his LinkedIn in the description below. But he asked me a message, and I'll post it somewhere in front of us here, basically asking me about KPIs for sales engineers. And we jumped on a call. We started brainstorming where we should, like, what are the KPIs, what they look like, what are we trying to incentivize. So I wanted to share that with you. We ended up recording it because it was an interesting conversation. It wasn't podcast length, so I'm going to put it here. And let me know what you guys think. I will see you when we're done. All right, so Paul Newsom, how you
Yes,
doing?
sir.
I think we covered that like 3 times. All right. So we started talking about KPIs and how we can make things effective. And you were asking me about my thoughts, but since we started recording, I'm asking you, like, how do you feel companies can measure the effectiveness of a process, a pre-sales process?
Well, that, as we both know, is an extremely simple question, but the answer is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this. I've been associated with pre-sales for almost 30 years, and in my experience, it's never been cracked. Not because there isn't a will to do it, but it's so difficult to actually make an association between the activities in the from a pre-sales perspective and what that means to the process. Yes, you could say, and I've even said it myself when I was doing the actual job. I said, do you know what? I won that deal because I did a fantastic demo. I did a great proof of concept. And if it wasn't for me, that deal would not have been won. And at the time, I firmly believed that. I now know with experience that probably wasn't quite true because there's a whole bunch of stuff in the background that goes on that I was unaware of, like all the commercial stuff and the relationship building and so on.
Are you saying that salespeople actually have a job to do?
Yeah. Well,
you're not allowed on this platform anymore.
Well, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit there, but in essence, yeah, I mean, they do some stuff in the background, of course they do. But there's a lot of stuff that we do but making that link, how can you make that direct correlation between a fantastic demo, unless the company, the audience is saying there and then, where's the contract? Let me sign the contract now. Then it's extremely difficult, extremely difficult.
Well, here's the thing that I see why it's hard to measure the effectiveness of the process. Not many companies have a process. A lot of times SEs just do whatever they want and salespeople do whatever they want. The process could be that the salesperson gets the SE involved in discovery. Does it actually happen? We don't know. So sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe we can measure, and like, you can't measure SEs in vacuum because their job is so related to salespeople. I mean, I've done role playing with my own, like I practiced demo on my own and ready to go kill it. And I show up to the meeting and the salesperson says one thing that throws the entire thing out of whack.
Oh, yeah.
Not because they're bad, just because we never had that chat beforehand or we never practiced together. So yeah, like, how do you measure success of 2 different teams together?
Well, and you talk about a sales process. We have a sales process, of course, like a lot of large companies would and should have. But the difficulty we have within that environment is how many times do I hear that people think that they're in one stage, but doing activities that are either way beyond or way behind. That there's still a human element to any process that can be bypassed with the right kind of smooth words from the salesperson. Said, look, I've got a really important demo next Tuesday. Can you do that for me? Oh yeah. So whereabouts are we in the sales process? What's has it been qualified? Oh yeah, it's all fine. It's all good. Just come along next Tuesday. We'll be fine. No problem. What about discovery? Oh, I've done the discovery. Here's my detailed notes. And there's a little list of 2 or 3 key items on that. So the human impact still has a massive. But I know a lot of people that listen to this might have heard of BANT, the qualification process. We've got a variation of that, but it means essentially the same sort of thing. And I think a simple qualification process, a few simple questions can really highlight where we are in the process and what needs doing. And therefore, you're then armed with a reason to go back to your boss if it isn't where you think it should be, and you're being asked to do something that's completely unreasonable, like a demo next Tuesday when you haven't had the discovery. But having that simple qualification process, it can be really, really helpful. And not being constrained by some complex process and lots of form filling, just a few simple questions. Is there a budget? Do they have authority? Is there a need? Is there a timeline? What is the risk? And those kind of things. So I think that's at the heart of any. And once you have that established, and once everybody's perhaps adhering to that very simple process, then you're perhaps in some way to understand what the impact will be of you now engaging at that certain point, what's going to happen thereafter, and then maybe start to think about, so what effort are we putting in here? Are we doing 3 or 4 demos and the proof of concept in that short time frame? Or are we just doing 1 demo and no proof of concept? And so those things could be measured to some point in terms of effectiveness. But again, it all comes down to the effort that's involved, what's at risk if you do that, and what may fall by the wayside with another really hot deal, perhaps. And therefore, what is the real measure of that effort? That's if we can find that's the golden egg in many respects.
Yeah, one thing I enjoy doing, at least for myself, is measuring like negative KPIs. Like,
right,
how many times I unqualified a deal for my salesperson. Like,
yeah.
Should I have been invited to that one? Because if you can measure like, hey, I've been invited to 5 unqualified deals, you can take it to your boss, who would then take it to the account manager's boss, and they would have that discussion. Or how many unqualified demos did I stop or did I push out? There are things that I don't think we measure. We measure how many times we did demos, how many times we contacted the customer.
Yeah, how many calls, how many
we stopped something.
Yeah.
So,
but then again, that made me think, because again, like a lot of, we're all, quite confident in terms of when we're in the pre-sale world, it's just a fantastic opportunity. How many times have I, maybe you as well, perhaps, have been asked to do a demo, no discovery, little background information, not that well qualified, but you think, I can turn this around. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I know my stuff here. I'm going to go into that demo and I'm going to rock it, and I'm going to, really help the sales guy here. So there's always that human element that's at play here as well with those situations.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a thin line also. Like, sometimes you have to do it. Now, you don't want to jump on an unqualified demo.
No.
But it's the whale that we've been trying to land for 5 years. Whether they have budget now or not doesn't really matter, because if we can get them hooked and interested, maybe when they have budget, they will buy it. And that's the big, maybe one day they will buy.
Yeah.
So like, how do you measure that KPI? Like, you just did a demo for 2 hours that was unqualified, not needed at that time, but could lead to a deal in the future, could lead to nothing. So yeah, it's and we were talking earlier, like how you measure KPIs is how you incentivize. At least that's something I said. You kind of disagree with that, so I'd love to hear your thoughts again around it. Like, why is, for me, I think if you want to incentivize people to do something, measure it. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I was talking monetary incentivizing.
Not necessarily monetary. No, like incentivizing them to do something.
Oh, right, okay. And I misunderstood the early point then in that case.
Okay.
Yeah, in that. Yeah. So they have a predefined role. They know what they have to do. Their task is to work in a team, and it can be, across different regions, perhaps. But there is a role. They have a task to fulfill. And they know what that, provided they know what that role is, which is to, assist the sales process, ensure we get one business, and it's efficient at the same time as well. So I think all those kind of things are still very important, and therefore I don't disagree from that point of view in the slightest. But providing it's clearly defined,
yeah.
But the other challenge that I see is that there are, if we just talk about the name of pre-sales. Yeah, how many variations can you think of that mean the same thing? And therefore that says something else, and say, we have 100 different titles for the same role. And when you ask what they do, well, I'm kind of an architect. So are you in the pre-sale world then? Well, not really, but they are. But they don't appreciate they are in that pre-sale. So it's not clearly defined in terms of their actual input in the world of the pre-sale process. They think they're way down the line, and that's all been done, and they're just there to design some kind of fancy architecture. So providing it's clearly spelled out what that role is and the importance of that role, still in the pre-sale world, then I think it's okay.
So if I understand you correctly, like, if someone wants to measure something, want to create KPIs to measure the pre-sales process and role, one, they have to have a defined process.
Yeah.
And two, they have to have a defined role.
Yeah.
For example,
absolutely.
The SEs that I work with, my pre-sales SEs, 90% of their time is spent on post-sales.
Right.
Right. Their role is not defined. Their role is help the customer in any way you can.
Sure.
So helping the customer means taking care of the urgent over the important.
Mm, mm.
Right? So they just spend their time there, and they're not incentivized not to do it. They're not incentivized to do it, but their role is not really defined.
It's not really clear. No, and that then just creates another problem, right? In terms of, you know,
what do you want the SE to do? Do you want the SE to respond to emails all day? Then track how many emails they send.
Yeah. If it's demo to win ratio, then track that quite easily, quite nicely. Organize the team, organize the logistics, all those kind of things you'd expect in the pre-sale world. And if that's a job, then that's the job. Then you could perhaps, providing people are willing to do it, you could track those things. But can you really say that pre-sale person that responded to 10 emails, completed the RFI, did a great demo, can you say that those things actually contributed to the deal being won at the end of the day? It's very difficult. Without them, yeah, absolutely. But is it any one thing in that process? I'm not so sure. I'm not sure it is.
And also, like, the thing I see it, because we're tied to salespeople, the pre-sales process has to be tied to the sales process.
Yeah.
And you can't measure the success of one without the success of the other. I mean, John Kerr always talks about, he doesn't like the term technical win, because we can get the technical win, still lose the deal.
Mm.
Is that still a success from the pre-sales process?
Yeah.
Or is it a failure from the pre-sales process because we didn't highlight enough value to give the salesperson the ammunition to actually negotiate?
Yeah. That's another a good tangent to go off in terms of the effectiveness of the pre-sales. We talk a lot about feature and I've been doing this since the days I was with Bob at Two Way Global and stuff, but that whole feature function stuff, it's got to be downplayed. Yes, it's important. Of course, it's important. They need to know what they're doing and how they're going to achieve it. But what's the real impact? And what's the connection between that element of your software and the goals of the business? A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people don't realize that because I'm a customer and I'm looking for a new HCM solution, as an example. We go in there, we talk about HCM and nothing else. There's not enough why questions in that. So why are you looking for this? You may find out there's some really convoluted link between that HCM solution, the fact that they're trying to achieve 10% growth in their business, but they've got a high turnover of really great staff. And they've got a high turnover because they didn't have a system there to monitor effectiveness, employee performance and satisfaction and all those kind of things. So if there's a way of the SE in that discovery meeting to keep asking those why questions, then there is a basis for a value conversation and the basis for a value demonstration. And that, again, is a great way to think about measuring that the performance in the early part of the process.
So like you were talking earlier before we started recording about like front loading the KPI measurement, because I'm thinking right now, sometimes customers buy despite of the sales engineering team, not because of.
Yeah.
But it's like, if someone were to measure the normal way of measuring it, I mean, for the first 2 years of my career, I was doing spray and pray, and we were hitting quota. We were closing deals. They weren't buying because of me; they were buying despite of me.
Yeah.
But from a performance KPI metrics, I was succeeding.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. But I never did a discovery. So, but how do you track if a discovery is done properly? That's the question that pops in my mind. Like, how do you
Yeah.
Because I can go into a meeting with you, like, hey, Paul, why did you send me that question about whatever? And you would say something. It's like, all right, well, that's the problem statement right there. Whereas if I dig in a little bit more, I can find the actual problem statement. Or
Yeah.
But how do you measure something that's so subjective? Like, I think I got the reason why. How do you measure that?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And
That's why you asked me.
If we know the answer to that question, we have solved the mystery of success metrics in that case. Yeah, and it still comes back to the front loading. You're right. Front loading. We know we have evidence that says that those organizations, those people that do front load the effort in that sales process, i.e., push hard for the qualification, make sure it's well qualified, do a great discovery, do lots of research, not just with the client, but with the industry.
Yeah.
So you've always got that thought leadership approach. You're always there adding insights into the process, and you're building up a good relationship at the early stages of that sales cycle. That we know has a direct impact later on in the sales cycle. We know that there are less legalities, less problems with commercials, less demos, less follow-on meetings, less things that you're going to mop up after it because you're front loading. So if you can find a way, back to you now, if you can find a way of measuring that front loading effort and making that link to the less effort later on, then I think we're onto a winner in that case.
Yeah, so you can't measure, like, you don't walk out of a discovery meeting and say it was a success or a failure. You can measure the success or failure of a discovery meeting by how much you sped up the sales cycle, basically.
Yeah.
How much
absolutely.
action.
Yeah, and also doing simple things like, okay, Mr. That's a great discovery. I've got a lot of great stuff here. And is it okay if I come back in a couple of days' time just to run through my findings, make sure I've understood things correctly, if anything's changed and so on? That's a test in itself. Because if they say, well, I'm sorry, but we're so busy, I've got three other guys like you asking the same, we just haven't got time. But if you've built up that rapport by doing that research in the first place, and you're adding those insights, there's a great chance that person believes in you, trusts you, and wants to spend more time with you to get it right. He almost wants you to win now because he's built up that relationship.
And from what I heard right now, you built that relationship by not asking the same questions that all the other vendors are asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because you just said something, oh no, like I have 3 other vendors asking the same questions.
Yeah.
So no, but if you actually were able to be insightful, and really dig into it and understand the actual problem, they would be more open to you coming back.
Yeah.
That's the nugget of the day. Basically, if I were to summarize like our conversation, it's very hard to measure, like it's very tricky to measure KPI. What was I saying? I think I just had a brain fart. All right, let me rephrase. Measuring success KPIs for SEs is very tricky, but if you try to like front load the success, front load the proper process, you can tell throughout the sales cycle if this was done properly.
Yes. Yeah, indeed, absolutely.
That was not the point that I was trying to get to, but I forget my point completely.
It's a great
let's
point
just stick with that.
It's a great point. I love that. and don't forget that the qualification questions as well, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah.
Not only to make sure that we're working on the right deal here, but to really understand where we are in that sales cycle.
In theory, salespeople should be doing the qualification. In theory, more often than not, I found myself in meetings where we're talking and then they say something like, "What? Hold on, you're asking for a 5K solution, but the solution you're actually asking for is $1 million."
Yeah.
This wasn't even qualified. So where do we go from here, Mr. Salesperson or
Mrs. So I think, the other thing is, we talk about asking the right questions. When I first started doing this job, many, many years ago now, I was going with my list of very detailed, technical feature function type questions.
Yes.
Nowhere on that sheet did it say why. What's the business impact?
How
Yeah.
many of this do you want? How many of
Yeah. What
that was
size?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. How
That was
many
so
users do you have? Yeah.
yeah.
Nothing
Well,
at all.
I'm in like the networking world. So how many ports do you want? What
Yeah.
speed? Like, do you want 10 gig, 1 gig, whatever?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then I realized like, why are they even asking me for those?
Exactly. There's doesn't matter what, like, who he's speaking to, and they sometimes may not know, by the way, what the driving force is.
Yep.
But that's another conversation. So where do we go to get the information? Who
Yeah.
else can I speak to? But but it's always great to think about almost ditching those detailed questions. Forget about them, and just talk about the business need, the business impact. What are you trying to achieve here?
But you can
'cause
always come back and ask those questions,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
that's
of course.
more of an
I'm oversimplifying here,
yeah,
but in essence, that's what I'm trying to get across here is that
more to
driving
build
toward
the
the high need.
material than anything else. But yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. All right. So ask the right questions. Figure out what the right questions are, because almost everybody thinks they're asking the right questions. I don't
Yes.
think I've met anyone who is asking questions that they think are wrong.
Mhm.
But second guess yourself, I guess. My biggest advice is just go through some self-reflection and figure out if you're asking the right questions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It took me years to figure that out.
Oh,
Honestly.
indeed, absolutely right. Yeah, but a lot of it will come down to the research that you do as well. I tell a lot of my students that just don't focus on the company. Just focus. That's important, of course it is.
Yeah.
But don't just check the website out. Check them out on LinkedIn. Check the company on not just the people, but the company. You probably get more up-to-date information on LinkedIn than you do on their website. What's the latest wins, the latest successes, the latest compliance issues, and blah blah blah. But then expand your research to the industry. Who are the movers and shakers? Who are the people who perhaps they're aspiring to be? So you can add that other information. Do you realize, by the way, that one of your main competitors, Company B, have applied this particular tactic and have had great success? Is that something that you would like to perhaps know more about? Could you see an impact in your business?
The problem with that for me specifically is I am also supporting Company B. So I cannot provide information. I can't use one against the other.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
no,
Yeah.
that's
Too competitive, right?
Yeah. No, I can't do that. But like, yeah, I agree with you. If you're not supporting both companies,
right.
means, use one.
Still stealing ideas. Yeah.
One thing I enjoy doing, or has been useful to me, is when I'm going to meet with a new company, I try to find a job description like on their website. If I'm meeting with a software validation person, I try to find a job opening for a software validation person in that company, and it will tell me what the responsibilities are. Not everything, but it will tell me some, which helps me have a conversation, understand how they're judged by their bosses.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Good stuff.
All right, well, we're gonna stop recording right now, so
okay,
we'll probably continue the conversation offline as well, but hopefully people will find use of this.
Sure.
So if I were to summarize this chat with Paul, is that there was a million ways to actually measure KPIs, but you can't do it unless you have a process, you have a role that's defined, and you know what you want to incentivize out of your people. What are you trying to get them to do? So these are 3 questions you have to ask yourself if you're looking for KPIs. And the thing is, you don't have to be a company to track KPIs. As an individual contributor, you should be tracking your own KPIs to figure out what you're doing well, what you're doing wrong. So that's it. Let me know what you think. I'll see you later. Peace.